The biting November wind howled off the Annapolis harbor, but it was the text message from his mother that truly froze Elias to the bone. "Don't come to the gala tonight, your appearance will only make our elite guests uncomfortable." He sat in the driver's seat of his beat-up 2008 Ford truck, the engine ticking quietly as it struggled to combat the freezing temperatures. Through the frosted windshield, the glittering lights of the Whitaker family's private yacht club shimmered against the dark water. Luxury sedans, sleek black town cars and silver European imports, rolled up to the valet stand one by one. Women in shimmering evening gowns and men in tailored tuxedos stepped out, laughing, their breath pluming in the icy air. It was the Whitakers' 40th anniversary gala, a celebration of legacy, of old money, and pristine reputations. And Elias, the youngest son, was parked 50 yards away, exiled in the shadows. He looked down at his phone again. The screen's harsh glare illuminated his worn flannel shirt and faded denim jeans. To the world, and to his parents, Arthur and Eleanor, he looked like a struggling dock worker, a stain on their perfect family portrait. They didn't see the brilliant mind beneath the scruff, nor did they care about the grueling hours he had spent building something truly revolutionary. They only cared about the aesthetic. The optics. A bitter smile touched his lips. He tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, shifted the old truck into drive, and pulled away from the curb. He couldn't stay here. The contrast between the warmth of the ballroom and the chill of his isolation was too much to bear. The streets of Annapolis were quiet, the impending Thanksgiving holiday keeping most folks indoors. The first snow flurries of the season had begun to fall, dusting the historic cobblestones with a fine, powdery white. Elias drove aimlessly for a few miles before pulling into the nearly empty parking lot of the Harbor Lights Diner. Its neon sign flickered, a solitary beacon against the encroaching winter night. Pushing through the heavy glass door, Elias was immediately enveloped by a wave of comforting heat. The diner smelled of stale roasted coffee, a hint of cinnamon, and the savory richness of roasting meat. It was a stark, unapologetic contrast to the champagne and caviar world he had just left behind. The place was mostly empty, save for a tired trucker hunched over a plate of eggs at the counter and a waitress wiping down tables in the back. Elias chose a quiet corner booth near a frost-edged window. He slid onto the cracked vinyl seat and unzipped his backpack, pulling out his battered, sticker-covered laptop. The hinges creaked as he opened it. On the screen, lines of elegant, complex code scrolled silently, the back-end of Value Core, the multi-million-dollar valuation software he had built entirely from scratch. But it wasn't the code that held his attention. It was the window layered over it. A drafted email to the investigative desk of the Wall Street Journal. Attached were gigabytes of undeniable proof, time-stamped repositories, original architecture documents, and recorded audio files that proved, without a shadow of a doubt, how his older brother, Marcus, had stolen the software during a supposed family brainstorming session. They had taken his life's work, slapped the Whitaker name on it, and threatened him with an army of corporate lawyers if he dared to speak up. His rough hands rested on the keyboard. He was one keystroke away from burning the fake Whitaker empire to the ground. He had the power to expose their deceit, to strip away the stolen glory Marcus was currently parading at the gala. Yet, a heavy, suffocating knot of guilt tightened in his chest. Blood ties were supposed to mean something. Even after they had pushed him out, silenced him, and banned him for simply looking poor, the ingrained loyalty of family made his fingers tremble. Was he really going to destroy his own parents? He stared out the window into the dark parking lot. The snow was falling harder now, blanketing the hood of his old truck. In the background, the diner's small television, perched above the pie display, caught his attention. The local news anchor was smiling brightly. And tonight, the historic Stamford Yacht Club plays host to the Whitaker family, celebrating 40 years of maritime excellence and unveiling a groundbreaking new tech initiative. The broadcast cut to a live shot of the gala's red carpet. There was his mother, Eleanor, draped in pearls, smiling radiantly for the cameras. And there was Marcus, looking slick and arrogant, shaking hands with a prominent investor, soaking in the praise for a genius he did not possess. The sight of their effortless deceit, while he sat shivering in a diner, banished the last remnants of his guilt. The isolation was absolute. They had not just stolen his work, they had erased his very existence. Elias's cold finger hovered over the send button. The cursor blinked, a rhythmic, pulsing demand for justice. The weight of the world pressed down on his shoulders, the profound loneliness of the holiday season amplifying the betrayal. He squeezed his eyes shut, preparing to initiate the downfall. Just as he is about to close the laptop and surrender to the shadows of his family's cruelty, a warm, raspy voice cuts through the diner's quiet hum. "You look like you could use a friend, hon. Before we find out who this kind stranger is, I want to take a quick pause. If you are still watching and finding this story valuable, please comment the number 8 below to let me know you're here with us. And if you haven't already, I highly encourage you to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Your wonderful support is what helps us continue creating great content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's get back to the story. The scent of roasted turkey and rich gravy suddenly replaced the metallic tang of the cold air, drawing Elias's eyes away from his glowing screen. Standing there was a woman whose gentle smile held more warmth than the entire Whitaker estate. She wore a faded pink uniform that had seen countless late-night shifts, her silver hair pulled back into a neat, practical bun. A plastic name tag pinned above her heart simply read, Martha. In her worn but steady hands, she carried a heavy, oval platter piled high with thick slices of roasted meat, steaming mashed potatoes, and vibrant cranberry sauce. Elias blinked, momentarily pulled from the digital precipice of his unsent email. He hadn't ordered anything. In his frantic rush to escape the agonizing proximity of his family's gathering, he had left his apartment with nothing but his truck keys and his backpack. He instinctively patted the pockets of his denim jacket, feeling the flat, empty space where his wallet should have been. A flush of embarrassment crept up his neck as he began to apologize, preparing to slide out of the booth and return to the freezing cab of his truck. Before he could utter a word of refusal, Martha gently pressed her free hand over his trembling fingers, stopping his retreat. She set the massive plate down on the cracked formica table, followed by a thick, ceramic mug. With a practiced grace, she filled the cup to the brim with dark, steaming coffee from a glass carafe. "Nobody goes hungry on a cold night near Thanksgiving, hon," she said, her voice a soothing, raspy melody that instantly put him at ease. "It's on the house. Eat up before it loses its spirit." Elias stared at the meal, a lump forming in his throat. It was the most beautiful thing he had seen all day. He picked up the heavy silverware and took a hesitant bite. The food was incredible, simple, honest, and made with a kind of care that no elite caterer could ever replicate. For the first time in what felt like years, someone was looking at him without evaluating his net worth or judging his threadbare clothes. Seeing him settle in, Martha didn't rush away. The diner was quiet, the only sounds being the low hum of the neon sign outside and a nostalgic country ballad playing softly from the vintage jukebox in the corner. She leaned against the edge of the adjacent booth, gazing out the frost-edged window at the swirling snow flurries. "It's really coming down out there," she murmured, wrapping her arms around her apron. "I just pray my old furnace holds up through the weekend. It's been acting like a stubborn mule lately, clanking and sputtering every time the temperature drops." Elias looked up, chewing slowly. "Furnace trouble is the worst. Have you had someone look at it?" Martha offered a soft, dismissive chuckle, waving her hand. "Oh, it'll have to wait. The bank isn't too keen on hearing about broken heaters when the mortgage is due. That's why I'm pulling these extra night shifts. Got to keep the roof over our heads before the foreclosure folks come knocking." Despite the heavy burden of her words, there was no bitterness in her tone. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a slightly crumpled photograph, holding it out with a proud gleam in her tired eyes. "Besides, I've got my grandson, Leo, coming over for the holiday. He's 5. Makes every double shift worth it, just to see him smile over a slice of pie." Elias stared at the picture of the grinning little boy. The profound humility of her situation hit him like a physical blow. Here was a 65-year-old woman, working her fingers to the bone, facing the terrifying prospect of losing her home, yet she possessed an abundance of grace. She was giving away her own shift meal to a scruffy stranger just because it was cold outside. The contrast between Martha and his own flesh and blood was sickening. As he drank the hot coffee, a dark memory clawed its way to the surface of his mind. He remembered the sprawling summer house in Connecticut. The fake family brainstorming session his brother Marcus had organized. Elias had trusted them. He had enthusiastically explained the complex algorithms of his valuation software, sketching out the architecture on a whiteboard while Marcus nodded, took meticulous notes, and smiled that slick, predatory smile. Days later, the corporate lawyers had cornered Elias, forcing him to sign a draconian non-disclosure agreement, claiming his independent work as proprietary company assets. They had stolen his genius to save their failing reputation, and when he argued, they threatened to bury him in legal fees until he was destitute. Marcus, swimming in millions and wearing bespoke suits, had robbed his own brother out of sheer greed. Martha, struggling to keep the heat on, was feeding a stranger out of pure love. A sudden, bitter draft slipped through the poorly sealed diner window, causing Elias to shiver violently. His faded flannel offered little protection against the dropping temperature. Martha noticed immediately. She frowned, tucking the photo away, and hurried toward the back room behind the counter. A moment later, she returned carrying a thick, heavy wool winter coat. It was dark navy, slightly worn at the cuffs, but undeniably warm. "Someone left this in the booth last February and never came back for it," Martha explained, shaking it out. She walked around the table and gently draped the heavy garment over Elias's shaking shoulders. She didn't just toss it, she adjusted the collar, her hands lingering for a brief second to give his back a firm, motherly pat. "There now. That ought to keep the chill off." Elias pulled the lapels of the thick coat closer to his chest. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and diner coffee. A profound, overwhelming sense of clarity washed over him. The guilt that had been paralyzing his fingers just moments ago evaporated, replaced by a quiet, unshakable resolve. He owed no loyalty to people who measured his worth by the fabric of his clothes while stealing the fruits of his mind. True value wasn't found in a ballroom, it was right here, in the simple, selfless act of a struggling waitress. Wrapped in the borrowed coat and the unfamiliar warmth of true compassion, Elias looked back at his laptop screen, his hesitation vanishing into the cold night. The keystroke echoed in Elias's mind louder than the diner's old jukebox as he finally hit send. The truth was out, flying through the digital ether straight to the editors of the Wall Street Journal. A small green checkmark materialized on the cracked screen of his laptop, accompanied by the simple, sterile words, "Message delivered." Elias stared at those 2 words until they blurred. For years, he had carried the crushing weight of his family's betrayal, a heavy stone of silent resentment that had pulled him under. Now, in the span of a single heartbeat, that weight dissolved. He exhaled a long, shaky breath that ruffled the steam rising from his ceramic coffee mug. He pulled the oversized navy coat tighter around his chest, savoring the residual warmth of the diner and the profound kindness it represented. He picked up his heavy silver fork and cut into the slice of cherry pie Martha had brought him. The tart, sweet filling tasted like victory. It tasted like freedom. He ate slowly, deliberately, listening to the gentle humming of the older waitress as she wiped down the counter across the room, completely oblivious to the digital earthquake that had just originated from her humble establishment. The investigative journalists had been primed, they only needed his authorization and the decrypted source files to publish. The timing was perfectly synchronized with the very event he had been deemed too unsightly to attend. Less than 3 miles down the snowy Annapolis coastline, the atmosphere inside the Stamford Yacht Club was thick with the scent of expensive cologne, imported champagne, and unchecked hubris. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden, flattering glow over the grand ballroom, illuminating the faces of the East Coast's most powerful investors and maritime brokers. Standing behind a mahogany podium, Marcus Whittaker looked every inch the conqueror. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian tuxedo, his gold Rolex catching the light as he gripped the edges of the stand. He projected an aura of effortless superiority, flashing a brilliant, practiced smile at the elite crowd. Sitting at the VIP table in the front row, Arthur and Eleanor beamed with immense pride, their earlier worries about their youngest son's embarrassing aesthetic completely forgotten in the intoxicating rush of high society validation. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus's voice boomed through the state-of-the-art sound system, smooth and commanding. Tonight, we don't just celebrate 40 years of Whittaker Yachts. We celebrate the dawn of a new era. For the past 2 years, our internal team has been developing a proprietary valuation architecture. A revolutionary algorithm that will entirely disrupt how marine assets are appraised globally. He was selling Elias's sleepless nights, Elias's brilliant mathematical frameworks, and Elias's soul, packaging it all neatly under his own name. Back in the quiet sanctuary of the Harbor Lights Diner, Elias closed his laptop. The satisfying click of the latch felt like the closing of a heavy vault door on his past. He reached into the front pocket of his faded jeans and pulled out 3 crumpled $5 bills, the absolute last of his cash until his independent startup, the Real Value Corp, officially launched to the public the following morning. He smoothed the bills out and slid them carefully under his empty coffee mug. It was a meager tip, far less than what Martha's boundless generosity deserved, but it was a silent promise. He stood up, slinging his backpack over his shoulder, and walked toward the exit. Martha looked up from the cash register, offering that same radiant, grandmotherly smile. "Heading out into the cold so soon, hon?" she asked, her voice carrying over the soft twang of the jukebox. "Yes, ma'am," Elias replied, his voice steadier and clearer than it had been in years. "Thank you for the meal. And for the coat. You have no idea what it meant to me tonight. Drive safe now." "Happy Thanksgiving," she called out as he pushed open the heavy glass door. The icy wind immediately bit at his cheeks, but the borrowed wool coat held the chill at bay. As Elias's boots crunched on the fresh, powdery snow of the parking lot, the digital fuse he had lit finally reached its explosive end. Inside the Yacht Club ballroom, Marcus raised his crystal flute high into the air. To the Whittaker legacy, he toasted, his voice echoing across the silent, attentive room. May our future be as pristine as our past. A few polite murmurs of agreement began to ripple through the crowd, but they were abruptly drowned out by a bizarre, synchronized mechanical hum. Deep in the pockets of tailor-made suits and inside glittering designer clutches, dozens of smartphones began to vibrate and chime in rapid, frantic succession. It wasn't just one or two, it was a cascading wave of breaking news alerts hitting the devices of every influential board member, hedge fund manager, and tech investor in the room. The polite smiles in the audience began to vanish. Heads bowed as screens illuminated the dim ballroom. A prominent venture capitalist in the second row tapped his screen, his eyes widening in absolute horror as he read the bold, unyielding headline from the Wall Street Journal: Yacht Tech founder accuses brother of massive IP theft in Whittaker family brokerage. The article detailed every stolen line of code, every timestamp, and the exact nature of the fraudulent non-disclosure agreement. The room descended into a chaotic hiss of urgent whispers. The clinking of glasses stopped. The string quartet in the corner faltered and fell silent. Arthur and Eleanor exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated panic as the board of directors began to stand up, their expressions shifting from admiration to furious disgust. Marcus lowered his glass, his practiced composure cracking as he watched the elite crowd turn on him in real time. He tried to speak into the microphone to regain control, but the noise of the outraged guests was already too loud. Marcus's smug smile faltered as a major investor shoved a smartphone into his chest, the glowing screen revealing a headline that would destroy the Whittaker legacy forever. As the truth finally catches up to the Whittaker family, let's take a brief pause. If you are still watching this video and finding value in the story so far, please type the number 1 in the comments below to let me know you're here. We would also love it if you could leave a meaningful thought or a warm wish. And if you haven't joined our family yet, I highly encourage you to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. Your wonderful support is what helps us continue creating great content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's get back to the story. The crystal champagne flute slipped from Marcus's grasp, shattering against the polished marble floor, a sharp, stinging prelude to the total collapse of the Whittaker empire. The explosive email Elias had sent from the quiet, cinnamon-scented diner just miles away had successfully reached the phones of every influential guest at the gala, turning years of silent, unacknowledged pain into a deafening public reckoning. The elegant string quartet, sensing the abrupt shift in the room's energy, stumbled over their instruments and faded into an awkward, heavy silence. All that remained was the frantic buzzing of incoming notifications and the sharp intake of collective breath from the elite crowd. A towering man in a bespoke charcoal suit, one of the primary venture capitalists backing the new valuation software, marched directly to the podium. His face was a mask of furious disbelief as he shoved his glowing smartphone into Marcus's chest. The stark, bold lettering of the Wall Street Journal article glared back at the room. It meticulously detailed the stolen intellectual property, providing undeniable digital footprints, encrypted timestamps, and copies of the coercive non-disclosure agreements used to silence the true creator. Marcus stammered, his slick, arrogant posture melting away like cheap wax. He looked desperately toward the VIP table, his eyes pleading with his parents to fix the unfixable. But Arthur and Eleanor were frozen in their seats, their complexions drained of color. The ultimate bold money nightmare was unfolding before their very eyes. The crowd, people they had spent decades courting and impressing with fake smiles and hollow promises, began to physically step back, turning their shoulders in synchronized disgust. The scent of spilled, expensive wine mingled with the sour stench of sudden, inescapable panic. Before Arthur could even attempt damage control, 3 senior board members of Whittaker Yacht surrounded the table. Their expressions were granite. There were no polite pleasantries, no gentle nudges. The chairman leaned down, his voice a low, lethal whisper that carried over the panicked murmurs of the ballroom. He demanded Marcus's immediate resignation, effective that very second, and stated in no uncertain terms that all family assets, corporate accounts, and executive privileges were frozen pending a massive federal fraud investigation. The glittering, exclusive party had instantly dissolved into a scandalous, humiliating nightmare. The superficial foundation they had built by stepping on their youngest son was crumbling to dust. Miles away from the chaotic ruin of the Stamford Yacht Club, the world was wonderfully, blissfully quiet. Elias steered his old Ford truck through the winding, snowy roads of Maryland. The heavy, borrowed navy wool coat insulated him perfectly, working in tandem with the truck's sputtering heater to keep the biting winter chill firmly at bay. The fresh snow blanketed the historic streets, transforming the landscape into a pristine, untouched canvas. For the first time in his adult life, Elias felt an overwhelming, profound sense of peace. The digital execution he had initiated wasn't born of malice, it was simply the truth, finally allowed to breathe. His peaceful drive, however, was continually interrupted by the harsh, vibrating rhythm of his smartphone resting in the cup holder. The screen lit up endlessly. First, it was a barrage of frantic calls from Marcus, undoubtedly looking for a way to scream, threaten, or negotiate his way out of the disaster. Then came the rapid fire, blaming texts from Arthur, demanding Elias answer the phone and fix the misunderstanding he had caused. They were drowning, and true to form, they were trying to drag him down with them to cushion their fall. Elias didn't speed up. He didn't grip the steering wheel in anger. He simply picked up the device at the next red light. With a calm, steady thumb, he selected Marcus's contact name and pressed block. He did the same for his father. There were no shouting matches, no tearful arguments, no dramatic explanations. He was erasing their control over his life, severing the toxic tether forever. Just as he was about to set the phone down, a final call slipped through. It was Eleanor. He let it ring out, sending it straight to voicemail, but a notification popped up a minute later indicating she had left an audio message. Curiosity, or perhaps a lingering sliver of a son's hope for a genuine apology, made him press play. His mother's voice filled the quiet cab of the truck, thick with hysterical tears. But she wasn't crying out of remorse for what they had done to him. She was sobbing about the country club board, about the humiliation of the investors walking out, and the sheer embarrassment of their ruined social reputation. She was lamenting the loss of their elite status, completely blind to the permanent loss of her child. Elias didn't feel anger. He only felt a deep, abiding pity for people who valued optics over love. With a gentle tap of his finger, he deleted the voicemail before she even finished her sentence. Elias tossed his silenced phone onto the passenger seat and smiled at the open, snowy road, finally breathing the crisp, unburdened air of true freedom. Chao ban, chien jia din, teep tuc len song day. Kai the qua chung ta dang rat tuat voi, and hung nut that doc hai de doak cat dut, va geo la luk nan vat chin qua chung ta gat hai quan got. A year had passed since the bitter winds of that Thanksgiving, and the Annapolis skyline looked entirely different from the top floor of Value Corp's new, bustling headquarters. Sunlight streamed through the expansive, floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm and golden glow over the open-concept workspace. The absolute silence Elias had rigidly enforced by blocking every phone number, email address, and social media account associated with his toxic relatives had granted him something invaluable, unadulterated, profound peace. That tranquility had become the fertile soil in which his genuine empire took root. Stripping away the negativity and manipulation of his past had proven to be the very first, entirely necessary step toward massive, undeniable success. He stood at the head of a sleek, modern conference table, dressed not in an imported, suffocating tuxedo, but in a thick, high-quality merino wool sweater and comfortable slacks. Around him sat a dedicated team of bright, driven engineers, analysts, and project managers. There was no hierarchy of fear in this room, no demands for blind loyalty to a hollow legacy. They respected Elias deeply, not because of a famous last name or flashy designer labels, but because he possessed a brilliant mind, paid them exceptionally well, and led the company with genuine, unwavering kindness. The final integration with the National Yacht Consortiums is fully operational, his lead developer announced with a wide grin, pulling up a digital chart on the smartboard that displayed a staggering, 8-figure revenue projection. The room erupted into spontaneous, enthusiastic applause. Elias smiled, a quiet, grounded expression of pure gratitude. His independent valuation software had transformed the maritime industry overnight, turning the once discarded, scruffy youngest son into a highly respected, self-made multimillionaire. The reality of his honest triumph stood in sharp, karmic contrast to the bitter ashes of the empire he had rightfully left behind. Miles away, in a cramped, poorly lit commercial real estate office located in a rundown suburban strip mall, Marcus Whitaker stared blankly at a blinking cursor on a dusty computer monitor. The slick arrogance that had once defined his every movement was completely gone, replaced by deep, dark bags under his exhausted eyes and a slumping posture. His wrist, once heavy with a solid gold Rolex, was now bare. The watch had been quietly pawned months ago to cover a fraction of the mounting, ruinous legal fees. The federal fraud investigation had completely bankrupted Whitaker Yachts, liquidating their assets to pay off furious investors. Arthur and Eleanor, once the undisputed king and queen of the Stamford elite, had been entirely excommunicated from their beloved yacht club. They now lived in bitter, suffocating isolation within a sprawling mansion they could no longer afford to heat, their desperate phone calls routinely ignored by the very high society friends they had once worshipped. Back in the sunlit, joyful haven of Value Core, the team meeting wrapped up with cheerful plans for the upcoming holiday weekend. As the room emptied, Elias's executive assistant, a cheerful woman named Sarah, walked in holding a small stack of sorted mail. "Just a few things before you head out for the long weekend, Elias," she said warmly, placing a beautiful, embossed envelope on top of his pristine desk. "The board of directors for the Global Tech Summit officially want you to deliver their keynote address next spring. And this forwarded letter arrived for you. It looks personal." Elias thanked her and picked up the second envelope. It was heavily wrinkled, made of expensive, thick stationery that had clearly seen better days. He recognized the elegant, looping handwriting instantly. It was from Eleanor. He didn't need to break the wax seal to know what ink stained the pages inside. It would be a desperate, tear-stained plea for a massive financial bailout. It would be a manipulative demand dressed up as a mother's love, begging him to pay the exorbitant property taxes to save their empty mansion from the bank's foreclosure. For a fleeting fraction of a second, Elias traced his thumb over his name written in his mother's hand. A brief, very human pang of pity fluttered in his chest. He remembered being a little boy, hoping to earn just a fraction of the pride she had freely poured onto Marcus. But that boy was gone, frozen out of a gala a year ago, replaced by a man who understood the profound difference between biological ties and actual, unconditional love. Protecting his hard-earned peace was worth far more than answering a toxic summons from the past. Without opening the envelope, Elias simply turned his wrist and dropped the heavy letter directly into the humming paper shredder beside his desk. The machine whirred to life, instantly turning the final, desperate grasp of the Whittaker legacy into meaningless paper ribbons. The sound was incredibly therapeutic, a definitive period at the end of a long, painful chapter of his life. With the ghosts of his past finally buried, Elias looked at his calendar. It was almost Thanksgiving again, and he had a very important, long-overdue promise to keep. The neon sign of the Harbor Lights diner still buzzed with that familiar, comforting hum as Elias pulled his sleek new sedan into the icy parking lot, his heart full of quiet anticipation. The bitter Maryland cold bit at his cheeks for only a moment before he pushed through the heavy glass door. The little bell jingled cheerfully overhead, announcing his arrival to a space that had saved his life exactly 1 year prior. The diner smelled identical to his memories, a deep, intoxicating blend of roasted coffee beans, cinnamon, and the sweet, fruity tang of fresh cherry pie. It was a haven of simple warmth, a sanctuary standing strong against the encroaching winter freeze just days before Thanksgiving 2026. Elias walked past the counter, his expensive but understated wool overcoat brushing against the vinyl stools, and slid into the exact same corner booth by the frost-edged window. He didn't look like a struggling, desperate dock worker anymore. His jaw was clean-shaven, his eyes were bright with unburdened peace, and he carried the quiet confidence of a man who had built an empire on his own terms. A moment later, a familiar figure stepped out from the kitchen carrying a coffee carafe. Martha looked perhaps a little more tired than the previous year, the deep lines around her gentle eyes speaking of countless double shifts and lingering, heavy worries about her mortgage. Her faded pink uniform was exactly the same, and her silver hair remained neatly pinned back in a practical bun. She wiped down the table next to his, completely failing to recognize the successful tech executive sitting in her section. To her, he was just another well-to-do traveler seeking refuge from the icy roads. She approached his table with a warm, welcoming smile, pulling her order pad from her apron. "What can I get you to warm up, hon?" she asked, her raspy voice wrapping around him like a familiar, comforting blanket. "Just a black coffee and a slice of your cherry pie, please," Elias replied, his voice soft, almost reverent. Martha nodded, quickly filling a heavy ceramic mug to the brim with steaming dark roast. As she set it down, Elias looked up, meeting her kind, tired eyes. "Did you ever get that stubborn old furnace fixed, Martha? And how is your grandson doing? Leo, wasn't it?" Martha froze, the coffee pot hovering in the air. Her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. She studied the handsome, wealthy man sitting before her, searching his clean features for any hint of familiarity. "I'm sorry, sir," she murmured, a polite hesitation in her tone. "Do I know you? I don't recall mentioning my Leo to anyone today." Elias offered a gentle, deeply emotional smile. "You might not recognize me without the scruff, or the heavy navy coat you pulled from the lost and found. But exactly 1 year ago, I sat in this exact booth. I was freezing, heartbroken, and completely broke. You brought me a plate of Thanksgiving turkey and told me that nobody goes hungry on a cold night. You paid for my meal when my own family wouldn't even let me in their door." The realization hit Martha like a gentle, overwhelming wave. Her breath hitched, and the polite customer service smile instantly melted into an expression of pure, unfiltered joy. Her eyes filled with unshed tears as she finally recognized the lost, shivering boy beneath the polished, successful exterior of the man sitting before her. "Oh, my heavens," she whispered, her trembling hand flying to her chest. "It's you. Look at you, hon, just look at how well you've done for yourself." Elias reached across the cracked formica table and gently took her weathered hand in his. "I only found the strength to build my life because you showed me that true value isn't about what you wear or how much money is in your pocket. You showed me unconditional kindness when I had absolutely nothing to offer in return. I just came back to say thank you." They spoke for a few more minutes, Martha beaming with maternal pride as she brought him his slice of pie. When Elias finally finished his dessert, he thanked her one last time from the bottom of his heart, buttoned his overcoat, and walked out into the crisp, peaceful night, the diner bell jingling a cheerful goodbye. Martha smiled as she watched his taillights disappear down the snowy, quiet road. She walked over to the corner booth to clear his dishes, picking up the empty ceramic mug to carry back to the kitchen. As she lifted the heavy cup, she noticed a piece of thick, expensive stationery neatly folded underneath. Beneath the paper lay a certified cashier's check. Martha set the mug down, her hands suddenly shaking uncontrollably as she picked up the slip of paper. She blinked, convinced her tired eyes were playing cruel tricks on her in the dim neon light. The check was made out to her name, bearing an unfathomable, life-changing sum, $50,000. Tears of pure, overwhelming joy streamed down the old waitress's face as she read the note: "To pay off the house, fix the furnace, and for the best turkey I've ever had. Happy Thanksgiving, Martha." Elias's journey from a freezing, rejected outsider to a man of profound peace reminds us that true wealth isn't measured by the exclusive galas we attend, but by the quiet integrity we hold within. When we strip away the harsh judgments of outward appearances, we open the door to genuine compassion. As Martha's simple slice of cherry pie and a borrowed coat so beautifully proved, a single act of unconditional kindness has a remarkable way of finding its way back to us. As the author of this story, my heart always swells at this ending because it reflects a profound truth. While toxic ties might temporarily break our spirit, the selfless warmth of everyday people can rebuild us stronger than before. If Elias and Martha's journey touched your heart today, please take a moment to share your own experiences of unexpected kindness in the comments below. We would be absolutely honored to have you subscribe to Retribution Raw and join our growing, supportive family. Together, let's keep sharing stories that prove good character will always outshine the deepest pockets. Thank you so much for spending your time with us, and may your days always be filled with warmth and light.